"You're not half the woman my mother is," were the words that came out of my daughter-in-law Victoria's mouth that night, just as I was serving the dessert I had made with so much love. Silence took over the dining room. My heart started to race, and without a second thought, I pushed my chair back and replied, "Then she can start paying your rent." My son Michael's face went completely pale. "Rent? What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide. At that moment, I knew my life was about to change forever, and that this revelation would be just the beginning of a story nobody expected. My name is Carol. I am 70 years old, and that night I discovered that a mother's unconditional love can become her greatest weakness. For months, I had been secretly paying the $800 a month for the apartment where Michael and Victoria lived, believing it was my duty to help my son through his financial difficulties. I never imagined that while I was sacrificing my life savings, they saw me as a burden, as someone inferior whom they could humiliate without consequence. It had all started 6 months ago, when Michael came to my house with tears in his eyes, explaining that he had lost his job and they had no money for rent. "Mom, it'll just be for a few months until I find something," he had told me with that broken voice that completely disarmed me. Like any mother who loves her son, I didn't hesitate for a second. I took my savings, the ones I had saved penny by penny over years of working as a seamstress, and began paying their rent without Victoria knowing. "It's our secret," Michael had asked. "I don't want Victoria to feel bad about depending on you." How naive I was to believe he was doing it to protect his wife's pride, when in reality it was to protect his own image as a provider. While I was counting every dollar to help them, they were living as if nothing had changed, going out to dinner, buying new clothes, planning vacations I knew they couldn't afford. The dinner that night had been special. I had spent the whole day cooking his favorite dish, a roast chicken with mushroom gravy, rice pilaf, and that vanilla cheesecake he had loved so much since he was a little boy. The table was perfectly set, with the crystal goblets I had inherited from my mother and the good silver I only used on special occasions. Victoria arrived in an elegant red dress and shoes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. From the moment they walked in, I noticed something different in the air. Victoria kept that forced smile I knew so well, the one she used when she was planning something unpleasant. Michael seemed nervous, avoiding my gaze, constantly fidgeting with his phone. During dinner, the conversation was tense. Victoria criticized everything: the temperature of the food, the decor of my house, even the scent of the air freshener I had put in the living room. "Carol, don't you think it's time you updated this place a little?" she had commented with that dismissive tone that bothered me so much. "My mother's house is so much more modern. She has that minimalist furniture that's in style now." I smiled tightly, trying to keep the peace, but inside I could feel the irritation starting to build. I had lived in that house for 30 years. Every object held a memory. Every corner told a story of my life. When it was time for dessert, I thought we could finally enjoy a pleasant moment. I had prepared the cheesecake with so much love, remembering how Michael would devour it as a child, how he used to tell me I was the best cook in the world. But instead of gratitude, what I received were those words that stabbed into my soul like thorns. "You're not half the woman my mother is." The impact of those words was like a slap across the face. I froze, the dessert spoon suspended in the air, feeling all the emotions welling up in my throat. Victoria looked at me with that cruel smile, as if she had been waiting all night for the perfect moment to hurt me. Michael lowered his head, avoiding my eyes, and in that instant, I understood that he already knew what his wife planned to say. "Excuse me?" I managed to articulate in a trembling voice, although deep down I knew I had heard her perfectly. Victoria leaned back in her chair with a false elegance, as if she owned my own home, and repeated the words with even greater cruelty. "You heard me, Carol. My mother is a successful, independent woman who built her own empire. She's never needed anyone. She has her company, her house on the beach, her trips to Europe. You? Well, all you know is how to cook and sew." Every word was like a hammer blow to my heart. I thought of all the years I had worked from 5 in the morning until 11 at night, sewing prom dresses, altering wedding suits, embroidering tablecloths for other people's weddings, while I never had the chance to plan my own. I remembered the sleepless nights when Michael was little and had a fever, how I sold my few pieces of jewelry to pay for his college education, how I worked double shifts so he could have everything he needed. "Victoria, please," Michael murmured weakly, but without enough force to truly defend me. Those 2 words were worse than silence because they confirmed that he agreed with his wife, that he had participated in this planned humiliation. My son, the same boy who once told me I was his hero, now allowed me to be treated like a servant in my own home. "No, Michael, let me finish," Victoria continued with that high-pitched voice she used when she wanted to sound superior. "Your mother needs to hear the truth. My mother would never have allowed her son to live like this, in this mediocrity." She made a dismissive gesture, pointing around my dining room, where there were so many beautiful memories. She would have helped us get something better, not kept us in poverty with her false kindness. It was at that moment that something inside me broke. It wasn't just the injustice of her words, but the absolute ingratitude of someone who had been living off my generosity without even knowing it. For 6 months, I had been the one paying for the roof over their haughty heads, the one who went without my arthritis medicine to make sure they had a comfortable place to live. I rose slowly from my chair, feeling the adrenaline course through my 70-year-old veins with a force I hadn't felt in years. "All right, Victoria," I said with a calm that surprised even myself. "If your mother is so superior, if she's so much better a woman than I am, then I think it's time she took on the responsibilities that such a successful woman should have." Michael looked at me, confused, but Victoria continued with that smug smile, as if she had won a battle. "Exactly, Carol. I'm glad you finally understand your place in this family." "Oh, I understand my place perfectly," I replied, feeling my voice grow firmer with each word. "And my place does not include continuing to pay the $800 a month for your apartment at 420 Maple Avenue, apartment 3B. The silence that followed was so profound I could hear the ticking of the kitchen clock. Michael shot to his feet so abruptly he knocked over his water glass. "What rent?" he yelled, his eyes wide, looking at me as if I had spoken in an alien language. "What are you talking about, Mom?" Victoria had completely lost her arrogant smile and was now looking at me with a mixture of terror and confusion that gave me immense satisfaction. "The rent I've been paying faithfully every month since February," I continued, savoring every second of their bewilderment. $800 that comes out of my bank account on the 5th of every month, plus the $100 extra for utilities that the landlord charges me for direct deposit. $900 in total that I pay so you two can live comfortably while you look down on me." Michael collapsed back into his chair as if his legs couldn't support him. "But you told me you had talked to the landlord, that he was giving you time to get the money," he stammered, his voice broken. Victoria was looking at him with a fury I had never seen before, as if he were responsible for ruining her moment of glory. "I lied," I admitted, without a hint of regret. "I lied because I thought I was helping my son, because I thought it was temporary, because I imagined that one day you would thank me for the sacrifice. But now I see that to you, I'm nothing more than a foolish old woman who deserves to be humiliated." Victoria tried to regain her composure, but her voice no longer had its previous arrogant confidence. "Carol, I didn't know you were. Michael never told me that." She began to stutter, but I cut her off by raising my hand. "I'm not interested in your excuses, dear. If your mother is as wonderful as you say, I'm sure she'll be delighted to take on this responsibility. After all, such a successful and independent woman would have no problem paying the rent for her daughter and son-in-law, right?" The irony in my voice was so thick that even Michael flinched when he heard it. The atmosphere in the dining room had become so tense it felt like the air itself had thickened. Victoria looked back and forth between Michael and me, as if she were rapidly calculating all the implications of what she had just discovered. Michael's hands were trembling, and he had started to sweat visibly. "Mom, why didn't you tell me the truth?" he finally asked, his voice broken. "Why did you let me believe you had worked out a deal with the landlord?" Michael's question echoed in the dining room like a painful cry. I looked at him intently, seeing in his eyes that mix of confusion and betrayal that broke my soul, but also feeling a rage that had been bottled up for far too long. "Why did I lie?" I repeated slowly, letting each word hang in the thick air of the room. "I lied to you because you're my son, Michael. Because when you came to my house, crying, telling me you had lost everything, that you didn't even have money to buy food, I couldn't just stand by and watch the boy I raised, the man I love more than my own life, Suffer. Victoria remained silent, but I could see her mind working quickly, trying to process the implications of this revelation. Her cheeks had lost that rosy color she always maintained with expensive makeup, and now she looked as pale as a sheet of paper. Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he'd made since he was a child when he was nervous or scared. I lied, I continued, my voice growing steadier, because I thought it was temporary, because I believed that when you got back on your feet financially, when you found a stable job, you would thank me. I never imagined that while I was depriving myself of medicine for my arthritis, while I stopped buying meat to save those $900 a month, you two were planning how to humiliate me in my own home. Michael tried to interrupt, but I raised my hand to silence him. No, now you're going to listen to me, Michael. For 6 months, I've been eating rice and eggs for dinner. I've been wearing the same pair of worn-out shoes because I didn't have the money to buy new ones. Do you know what I did last week? I sold your father's wedding ring, the ring I kept as my most precious treasure, so I could pay your rent and have some food in my refrigerator. Tears began to well up in my eyes, but they were tears of rage, not sadness. I sold the only physical memory I had of my husband, of the man who loved me for 30 years, to support a couple who considers me inferior, mediocre, unworthy of respect. Victoria finally found her voice, though it now sounded small and shaky. Carol, I didn't know. Michael never told me you were paying, but I cut her off with a look that could have melted steel. Of course you didn't know, dear. Because your husband preferred to lie to you too. He preferred for you to believe he had gotten the money on his own rather than admit he was depending on his mediocre mother. The word mediocre I pronounced with so much venom that Victoria visibly flinched. Michael finally exploded. Mom, I never wanted it to be like this. You insisted on helping me. I didn't ask you to sacrifice so much. His voice sounded desperate, like a child caught in a lie. But his words only fueled my fury more. I insisted? I shouted, finally losing my composure. You came to my house sobbing like a 5-year-old. You told me you didn't even have enough for bread, that Victoria was crying every night from the shame of not being able to pay the bills. What kind of mother would I have been if I had closed my door on you? The silence that followed was devastating. Michael looked at Victoria with a reproachful expression that she returned with equal intensity. It was clear there were secrets and lies all around, that neither of them had been completely honest with the other. You know what hurts the most, Michael, I continued, feeling the tears stream freely down my wrinkled cheeks. It's not the money. It's not the sacrifices. It's that for all these months, every time you came to visit, I saw contempt in your eyes. Victoria criticized my house, my food, my clothes, my manners, without knowing it was my money paying for her roof. And you let her. Michael tried to approach me, but I took a step back. Mom, please, let me explain. There's nothing to explain. I cut him off sharply. I just heard the explanation. Your wife believes I'm not half the woman her mother is. Fine. Then her mother can prove what kind of woman she is by taking care of her responsibilities. Victoria finally found some courage to speak, though her voice still trembled. Carol, my words were. They were said in a moment of. I was upset about other things, and upset about other things. I interrupted with a bitter laugh. You mean upset because you have to eat at the house of the woman who pays your rent? Upset because you have to feign cordiality with someone you consider so inferior? The tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Michael was pacing the dining room like a caged animal, while Victoria sat, twisting a napkin between her trembling hands. Do you know what's saddest about all of this? I continued, feeling a strange, calm wash over me. It's that I really believed we were a family. When I married your father, Michael, I dreamed of having many children, of grandchildren running through this house, of family dinners filled with laughter and love. After years of trying to get pregnant, when you finally came along, I thought God had given me the greatest gift in the world. Michael stopped pacing and looked at me, his eyes full of tears. Mom, I love you. You know I love you. Love isn't just words, son. Love is actions, it's respect, it's protection. When your wife insults me and you stay silent, when you allow her to humiliate me in my own home, when you lie to me to hide that you're financially dependent on me, that's not love. That's convenience. Victoria shot to her feet, knocking over her chair. That's enough. I'm not going to stand here and listen to this lecture. Michael, we're leaving. Now. Her voice had regained some of its characteristic arrogance, but I could see the panic in her eyes. No, Michael said firmly, surprising us both. We're not leaving until we sort this out. Mom, sit down, please. We need to talk like adults. But I had already made my decision. There's nothing more to talk about, Michael. The cards are on the table. Your wife has made it very clear what she thinks of me, and you've shown that you agree with her. Starting tomorrow, I will no longer pay your rent. If Victoria's mother is as superior as she claims, I'm sure she'll find a way to help you. But Mom, you can't do that, Michael yelled. And for the first time all night, I saw genuine terror in his eyes. We don't have the money. I got fired 2 weeks ago. I was going to tell you after dinner. Michael's words fell upon the dining room like a bomb. You were fired 2 weeks ago, I repeated slowly, feeling a new wave of betrayal wash over my chest. And you didn't tell me anything? You let your wife humiliate me here, knowing that you are completely dependent on me. My voice broke on the last word, but not from sadness, from an indignation so deep that my hands were trembling. Victoria spun towards Michael, her eyes filled with fury. What? You were fired 2 weeks ago and you didn't say anything? I've been spending money as if everything was normal while you... She couldn't finish the sentence. She covered her face with her hands and began to sob in a way so dramatic she looked like a soap opera actress. Victoria, please, let me explain, Michael began, but she cut him off with a choked scream. Don't tell me to calm down. Just yesterday, I bought those $400 shoes. Last week, I booked the spa for my birthday. Michael, we're broke, and you let me spend like an idiot. Her tears had completely ruined her makeup, and now she looked exactly like what she was, a desperate and terrified woman. I watched this surreal scene from my position by the table, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and pain. For months, I had been the one carrying the weight of supporting this couple, and now they were finally seeing the reality of their situation. Michael looked defeated, his shoulders slumped, and his face in his hands. You know what's most pathetic about all this, Michael? I said, with a calm that surprised me. That even now, even after discovering you've been lying to and humiliating me, my first instinct is to ask if you need help. That's what a mother does, son. That's what unconditional love does. Michael lifted his head to look at me, and for a moment I saw the little boy who used to run to me when he had nightmares. Mom, I lost the job because I was late 3 times in a row. Victoria had been sick, and I had to take care of her, take her to the doctor, and... Victoria interrupted him with a murderous look. I wasn't sick. I had appointments with the dermatologist for my beauty treatments. Don't use me as an excuse for your irresponsibility. The mask had completely fallen. The elegant, superior woman who had arrived at my house had vanished, revealing someone vulgar and desperate. Beauty treatments? I asked in disbelief. Are you telling me my son lost his job because he had to take you to beauty treatments? While I was selling my jewelry to pay for your roof, the laugh that escaped my throat was so bitter it scared even me. Michael approached me, his hands extended in a pleading gesture. Mom, please, I know I've made mistakes. I know I've failed you, but you can't abandon us now. We have nowhere to go. Victoria's parents are in Europe, and... But Victoria interrupted him again. My parents aren't in Europe. They're in the city. You told me to tell them we were fine so they wouldn't worry. Lie after lie was being peeled away like layers of a rotten onion, and each new revelation hit me like a slap. Then go to them, I said with a firmness I didn't know I possessed. Go to Victoria's parents, to that modern house with minimalist furniture and the successful, independent mother. I'm sure they'll be delighted to welcome their daughter and her unemployed husband. Victoria stood up, swaying slightly, as if she'd been physically struck. I can't go to my parents. They don't know that Michael lost his previous job too. They think he's a manager at a construction company. Another lie. My son wasn't just a liar. He was a chronic liar who had built an entire life based on falsehoods. How many jobs have you lost, Michael? I asked, in a voice so low I could barely hear it. How many times have you lied to me? The silence that followed was deafening. Michael couldn't look me in the eye, and Victoria had started sobbing again, but this time more genuinely, as if she had finally grasped the magnitude of her situation. 3 jobs in the last 2 years, Michael finally admitted, his voice cracking. I always found excuses. I always told you it was temporary, that companies were downsizing. He stopped and looked at me with those eyes that were once my whole world. Mom, I have a problem. I think I have a real problem. For the first time all night, I felt something akin to compassion. My son wasn't just a liar, he was someone who needed professional help. But compassion didn't erase the betrayal. It didn't heal the wounds his words and his wife's had opened in my heart. Michael, I said slowly, recognizing you have a problem is the first step. But I can't keep being your safety net while you do nothing to change. I can't keep sacrificing my well-being to maintain a life built on lies. Victoria stood up abruptly, wiping her tears with the sleeve of her red dress. This is ridiculous. Carol, you're his mother. Mothers don't abandon their children. My mother would never do this to me. The arrogance was back in her voice, like defensive armor. Your mother has never had to deal with this because you've never told her the truth, I replied with an icy calm. And you're right about one thing, Victoria. Mothers don't abandon their children. But I'm not abandoning my son. I'm stopping him from using me. Michael came over and took my hands in his. They were cold and trembling. Mom, I promise I'm going to change. I'll get help. I'll find a job. I'll do things right this time. Just give me one more chance. I looked at those hands that were once small, that I held when he learned to walk, when he was afraid of the dark, when he needed comfort after a nightmare. Michael, how many last chances have I given you? How many times have you made me the same promise? He couldn't answer, because we both knew the answer. I had lost count of the times we'd had this same conversation, of the broken promises, of the crushed hopes. The lease is up next month, I announced, gently pulling my hands from his. You have 30 days to find a solution. After that, I will no longer be responsible for your housing. Victoria stormed towards the door. Let's go, Michael. I'm not going to stay here and be humiliated by a woman who doesn't understand what family means, but Michael didn't move. Victoria, you go if you want. I need to talk to my mother. His voice had a firmness I hadn't heard in years, and for a moment, just for a moment, I saw a flash of the man he could have been. Victoria stopped dead in her tracks when she heard Michael's words. She turned slowly, and the expression on her face was a mixture of disbelief and pure fury. Are you asking me to leave? Me? After everything I've sacrificed for this marriage? Her voice had become high-pitched, almost hysterical, and she gestured with her hands as if conducting an invisible orchestra. Victoria, please, I need to fix this with my mom. Too much has happened tonight and… Michael tried to explain, but she cut him off with a scream that probably woke up the entire block. No, I'm not going anywhere. If you're going to grovel like a dog in front of your mother, you're going to do it with me present. She crossed her arms and planted herself firmly in the center of my dining room, like a statue of stubbornness. Besides, this conversation directly affects me. If she stops paying our rent, where are we going to live? A homeless shelter? I watched this scene with a mixture of fascination and horror. In a single night, I had seen the perfect facade this couple had built crumble, revealing the lies they had been weaving for months. It was like watching a car crash in slow motion, terrible, but impossible to look away. Victoria, I finally said, I think you've said enough for one night. You've made it very clear what you think of me, and I've been equally clear about what I think of you two. There isn't much more to discuss. Yes, there is plenty more to discuss, she shouted, her face turning as red as her dress. You can't just ruin our lives because you were offended by a comment. Families forgive each other. Families support each other. The hypocrisy of her words hit me like a slap. Families support each other? I repeated slowly. You mean how you've supported me tonight? Or how Michael has supported me by lying about his employment situation? Or maybe you mean how you've supported me by letting me sacrifice my savings while you live as if nothing happened? Michael sat down heavily in one of the dining chairs, his head in his hands. Mom, I know we've made terrible mistakes. I know we've hurt you in unforgivable ways. But if you turn your back on us now, we literally have nowhere to go. That's not my problem, I replied, and the words came out of my mouth with a hardness that surprised even me. For 70 years, I've been taking care of others. I took care of my parents until they died. I took care of your father during his illness. I've taken care of you since the day you were born. Do you know when the last time was that someone took care of me? When was the last time someone worried about my well-being? The silence that followed was deep and painful. Michael lifted his head and looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since he was a little boy, that mix of guilt and understanding that appeared when he finally understood he had done something very wrong. Never, he admitted, his voice barely audible. I've never worried about taking care of you. I always just assumed you'd be there, that you'd always be okay, that you'd always have the strength to solve everyone's problems. Victoria seemed to be losing patience with this emotional conversation. Enough with the melodrama. Carol, you're the mother. It's your responsibility to help your son. You can't just decide you don't want to be a mother anymore. Those words were the last straw. I walked up to Victoria until I was just inches from her face, and when I spoke, my voice was so low and threatening that she instinctively recoiled. Don't you ever, ever tell me what kind of mother I should be. I have been a mother for 35 years. I have sacrificed my youth, my dreams, my opportunities, my money, my health, everything for my son. What have you sacrificed? Your beauty treatments? Your $400 shoes? Victoria tried to answer, but I continued without giving her a chance. Being a mother doesn't mean being a bottomless ATM. Being a mother doesn't mean accepting humiliation and disrespect. Being a mother means teaching your children to be responsible, independent, respectful people. And in that, clearly, I have failed. Michael shot to his feet, knocking over his chair. Don't say that. You've been a wonderful mother. I'm the problem. I'm the one who failed. Yes, Michael, you have failed. But I have also failed by letting this go on for so long, by allowing you to become a man who lies to his wife, who lies to his mother, who allows the woman who raised him to be humiliated. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but my voice remained steady. Victoria had started pacing the dining room like a caged animal. This is a nightmare. This is a damn nightmare. Mothers-in-law are supposed to help their daughters-in-law. We're supposed to be a family. Family? I interrupted with a bitter laugh. When have you treated me like family, Victoria? When have you shown me respect, affection, consideration? From the day you met Michael, you've treated me like an obstacle, like an annoyance you have to tolerate to keep your husband happy. That's not true, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. It's not true? I asked, crossing my arms. Remember last Christmas, when you suggested it was better for you to spend the holidays alone because I didn't understand modern traditions? Remember when I offered to cook for your anniversary and you said you'd prefer something more sophisticated? Remember when you criticized me for wearing my favorite purple dress because women my age should wear more discreet colors? Each example I listed was like a small stab, and I could see Michael cringe with each memory. He had been present on all those occasions, had heard every hurtful comment, and had never said a word in my defense. Victoria, I continued, you never wanted to be part of this family. You wanted this family to disappear so you could have Michael all to yourself. Well, congratulations. It looks like you're going to get exactly what you wanted. Michael approached me, his eyes filled with tears. Mom, please, give me a chance to fix this. I'll talk to Victoria. I'll get professional help. I'll find a job. I just need time. Time? I repeated softly. Michael, I've given you 35 years of time. I've given you chance after chance after chance. How much more time do you need to become the man you were supposed to be? Victoria had stopped pacing and was now watching us with a calculating expression. I could see her mind working, trying to find a new strategy, a new way to manipulate the situation to her advantage. Fine, she finally said with a strangely calm voice. If that's what you want, Carol, perfect. But don't come crying to us when you realize you've lost your only son forever. When you're all alone in this old house, surrounded by your musty memories, remembering that you had a family and you threw them out onto the street because of your stupid pride. Her words were designed to hurt me, to make me feel guilty, to break my resolve. And for a moment, they almost worked. The image of being alone in this house, with no visitors, no phone calls, no one needing me, was terrifying. Victoria's words echoed in the dining room like a curse, designed precisely to attack my greatest fear, loneliness. For a moment, the picture she painted took hold of my mind. I saw myself in this empty house, without the laughter of grandchildren who never came, without Sunday phone calls, without anyone to remember my birthday. The silence stretched between us like a sticky web, and I could feel Michael watching me, waiting for my resolve to crumble. But then, something extraordinary happened. Instead of feeling panic or despair, I felt a deep, liberating calm. "You know what, Victoria?" I said slowly, savoring each word. "I would rather be alone and at peace than accompanied and humiliated. I prefer my musty memories of a happy marriage and years of honest work over creating new memories of lies and disrespect." Victoria blinked several times, as if she hadn't expected that response. Michael's jaw dropped, and I could see him slowly processing that his final card of emotional blackmail had completely failed. "Besides," I continued, feeling a new energy course through my veins, "I'm not going to be as lonely as you think. Just yesterday, I got a phone call that changed everything, but you two were so busy planning how to humiliate me tonight that I didn't tell you. Stephen Herrera called me." The name dropped into the dining room like a nuclear bomb. Michael froze, and for the first time all night, Victoria was completely speechless. Stephen had been my boyfriend during my college years, the man I had planned to marry before I met Michael's father. He was an ambitious, intelligent man who had decided to move to the United States to seek better opportunities when I chose to stay and start a family. "Stephen Herrera?" Michael mumbled, his voice cracking. "The Stephen from the photos? Your college boyfriend?" I nodded slowly, enjoying the look of absolute shock on their faces. "The very one." It turns out that after 40 years of building an engineering firm in California, after raising 3 successful children and losing his wife 2 years ago, he decided to look up his old friends. He found me through social media, and we've been talking on the phone for the past 2 weeks. Victoria finally found her voice, though it sounded strangled. "What do you mean you've been talking?" Her face had taken on a greenish hue that was not at all flattering. "I mean exactly that. We've been talking every day, remembering old times, telling each other about our lives, our fulfilled and unfulfilled dreams. And last night he made me an offer that took my breath away." Michael approached me with hesitant steps. "What kind of offer, Mom?" I smiled for the first time all night, a genuine smile that came from the depths of my heart. He invited me to spend a month at his house in San Diego. He says he wants to show me California. He wants me to meet his kids, that he's always wondered what would have happened if— I left the sentence hanging, enjoying the absolute silence that had taken over the dining room. "But, Mom," Michael stammered, "you can't just go off with a man you haven't seen in 40 years. What if he's a con artist? What if he's lying to you? What if— What, Michael?" I interrupted with a firmness that surprised me. "What if he turns out to be a liar like you? What if he uses me like you have? At least with Stephen, I'll be having an adventure, seeing new places, being valued for who I am, not for what I can give financially." Victoria had collapsed into a chair, her face in her hands. "This can't be happening. This is a nightmare. You can't be serious about going away with a stranger. Stephen is not a stranger to me. He knows my dreams, my fears, my hopes, because we shared them when we were young. He knows I always wanted to travel, that I always wanted to see the Pacific Ocean, that I always dreamed of writing a book about my experiences as a seamstress. Do you know what the first thing he said to me when he called was? 'Carol, I hope you chased all your dreams because you deserved an extraordinary life.' Tears began to run down my cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not sadness. When was the last time either of you asked me about my dreams? When was the last time you cared if I was happy, if I had plans, if there was anything I wanted to do with my life?" Michael tried to approach me, but I held up my hand to stop him. Stephen sent me pictures of his house, of his garden full of orange and yellow flowers, of the ocean view from his deck. He told me about his trips to Europe, about the books he's read, about the dinners he cooks for his friends every Friday. And you know what else he told me? Victoria lifted her head to look at me, her eyes red and filled with resentment. "What did he tell you?" "He told me that a woman of my age and experience is a treasure, that I have stories to tell, wisdom to share, love to give. He told me that any man would be lucky to have my company, my conversation, my affection. My voice broke slightly as I recalled those words, which had healed wounds I didn't even know I had. After I hung up that call, I sat in my kitchen and cried for an hour. But I didn't cry from sadness, I cried from relief. I cried because someone had finally reminded me that I am more than a mother, more than a provider, more than a free maid. I am a woman with her own worth. Michael had turned ashen. "Mom, please, don't make any rash decisions because of what happened tonight. Stephen could just be telling you what you want to hear. Scammers are very skilled. Enough," I shouted with a force that surprised even me. "Enough trying to control my life. Enough telling me what I can and cannot do. For 35 years, I have lived for you. I have made every decision thinking about your well-being, your future, your happiness. For the first time in decades, I am going to make a decision thinking about myself." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael had slumped into a chair, his head in his hands, sobbing like a small child. Victoria was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and terror, as if she had seen a ghost. "You know what else Stephen told me?" I continued, feeling my confidence grow with each word. "He told me he had kept a picture of me from when we were 20, the one where I'm wearing the white dress with red flowers that I had sewn myself. He said that all these years, especially after his wife died, he would look at that photo and wonder if I had been happy, if I had managed to fulfill my dreams." Michael lifted his head, his eyes swollen from crying. "And what did you tell him?" I told him the truth, that I had had moments of happiness, especially when you were little, when your father was alive, when I thought I was building something beautiful called a family. But I also told him that I had sacrificed so much of myself in the process that I no longer remembered who Carol was before she was Michael's mother or Frank's widow. Victoria shot to her feet as if stung by a bee. "This is ridiculous. You can't leave with that man. What will people say? A woman your age chasing romantic adventures like a teenager." I looked her directly in the eye and smiled with a serenity I hadn't felt in years. "Victoria, dear, after tonight, what people think is the last thing I'm worried about. After all, if my own family considers me inferior and mediocre, what does the opinion of strangers matter?" Michael finally found the strength to speak. "Mom, if you really want to meet Stephen, if you really want to travel, we could support you. But don't do it out of spite. Don't ruin your life just to punish us." "Ruin my life?" I repeated in disbelief. "Michael, don't you understand? This isn't a decision made out of spite. This is a decision of survival. For the first time in decades, someone is offering me a chance to be happy, to be valued, to be loved for who I am, not for what I can provide." I walked to my dining room window and looked out at the street where I had lived for so many years, where I had raised my son, where I had buried so many dreams. Tomorrow, I'm going to call Stephen and I'm going to accept his invitation. I'm going to buy a plane ticket. I'm going to pack a suitcase with my best dresses, and I'm going to find out if it's still possible to be happy at 70 years old. The weeks following that dinner were the strangest of my life. Michael tried to call me every day for the first week, leaving desperate messages on my answering machine, pleading with me to reconsider my decision, not to go with Stephen, to give him another chance. Victoria, on the other hand, didn't bother to contact me once, which was both painful and liberating. At least I knew exactly where I stood with her. Stephen and I talked every night on the phone, conversations that stretched for hours, just like when we were young. He told me about his life in San Diego, about his work as a civil engineer, about the projects he had built across California. I told him about my years of sewing, about the wedding dresses I had created, about the stories each client had shared with me. It was strange and wonderful to feel interesting again, to feel that someone valued my experiences and my memories. "Carol," he had said during one of our late-night calls, "I've thought about you for 40 years. When I married Margaret, when my kids were born, when I built my company, there was always a part of me that wondered what would have happened if I had been brave enough to ask you to come with me to America." His words filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in decades. "Stephen, I thought about you many times too, especially when things got tough, when his father was sick, when Michael started having problems. I wondered what my life would have been like if I had gotten on that plane with you. Well, he had replied with that deep laugh I remembered perfectly. It's never too late to find out, is it? The plane ticket sat on my nightstand, real and tangible like a promise of freedom. Departure, March 15th. Destination, San Diego, California. Stephen had insisted on paying for the ticket, but I had refused his offer. This is my decision, my adventure, I had told him. I want to pay for it with my own money. The money I had saved for months by skimping on medicine and decent food, money I would now use for something that would make me happy for the first time in years. 3 days before my trip, Michael showed up at my door. He looked terrible gaunt, with deep dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled as if he'd slept in them. "Mom, please, we need to talk," he said in a broken voice that broke my heart despite everything that had happened. I let him in but kept my emotional distance. "Where's Victoria?" I asked as I made coffee in my small kitchen. "At her parents' house," he replied, sitting heavily in my kitchen chair. "She left a week ago. Says she can't be with me if I don't have a job, if I can't keep her in the lifestyle she deserves." He laughed bitterly. "Turns out her superior mother isn't so superior when it comes to helping out financially. They told her to figure it out on her own." I felt a pang of satisfaction that wasn't particularly noble, but one I couldn't help. "And what are you going to do now?" "I've been desperately looking for a job. I've applied everywhere. Offices, restaurants, stores, construction, anything. I'm willing to do anything." He lifted his head to look at me, and I saw something in his eyes I hadn't seen in years. Genuine humility. "I've also started going to therapy. I found a community center that offers free services." "I'm glad to hear that, Michael," I said, and I meant it. That's an important step. The therapist helped me understand a lot of things about myself I didn't want to see. He helped me understand that I've been an emotional and financial parasite, not just with you, but with everyone who has tried to help me. His words sounded rehearsed, as if he'd practiced this speech many times in front of the mirror. "And what have you learned specifically?" I asked, curious to see if there had really been a change or if this was just another manipulation. Michael took a moment to answer, nervously fiddling with his coffee cup. "I've learned that I never learned to be responsible because you were always there to rescue me." "It's not your fault," he added quickly when he saw my expression. "It's mine. But the pattern was set very early on, and I never made the effort to break it." I nodded slowly. "And Victoria? What did you learn about your relationship with her?" "That it wasn't love I felt for her. It was emotional dependency. I liked that she was demanding and critical because it gave me excuses not to grow, to remain a child who needed his mom to rescue him." He paused and looked me directly in the eyes. "Mom, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I've destroyed our relationship. But I need you to know that for the first time in my adult life, I'm seeing things clearly." "And what exactly do you see?" I asked carefully. "I see a 70-year-old woman who sacrificed her entire life for a son who never thanked her for it. I see a woman who worked her hands to the bone to give me an education and opportunities that I squandered. I see a woman who deserves to be happy, who deserves to be valued, who deserves to chase her own dreams after decades of chasing mine." His words moved me, but they also made me cautious. "Michael, I'm glad to hear you're reflecting on these things. But words are easy. Real change takes time and consistent action." "I know," he said, nodding vigorously. "And I'm not here to ask you to cancel your trip. I'm not here to ask for money or help. I'm here to tell you that I'm going to prove with actions that I can change, even if you're no longer here to see it." "What do you mean by that?" Michael got up and started pacing my small kitchen. "I got a job with a cleaning company. It's night work, pays little, but it's honest, and it allows me to live in a small room I rented near downtown. I'm also taking online classes to get a certification in accounting." I looked at him with genuine surprise. "When did you decide to do all this?" "The night after our dinner. When I got home and Victoria started screaming at me for ruining our financial situation. Something inside me just snapped. I realized I was 35 years old and had never been responsible for my own life for a single day." He sat down again and took my hands in his. "Mom, I want you to go to California. I want you to meet Stephen, to see the ocean, to write that book you've always wanted to write. I want you to be happy, even if it means I'm no longer a part of your life." For the first time since the night of the dinner, I felt like I was talking to my real son, not the manipulative, dependent version I had known for so many years. Michael, you will always be a part of my life. You are my son, and you always will be. But you need to understand that our relationship can't stay the same. I understand completely, he said firmly. And I want you to know that I'm going to work on becoming the kind of son you can be proud of, even if it takes years, even if by then it's too late to repair our relationship. We sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Michael spoke again. Would you tell me about Stephen? What was he like when you were young? An involuntary smile spread across my face. He was brilliant, ambitious, gentle. He had this way of making me feel like the most interesting woman in the world. When we talked, he would focus completely on me, as if my words were the most important thing he had ever heard. Why didn't you go with him when he left for the States? Because I was scared, I admitted. Scared of leaving everything I knew, scared of failing, scared of not being good enough for him. And then I met your father, and he represented security, stability, a predictable life. I paused. I don't regret choosing your father. He was a good man, and we had beautiful moments. But now I have a second chance to find out what would have happened if I had been braver. Michael nodded slowly. Do you think Stephen has really thought about you all these years? Or do you think he's idealizing the past? Michael's question made me think deeply. You know, Michael, I've asked myself that same question every night since Stephen contacted me. Is what he feels real? Or are we two older people idealizing a youthful love? I got up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I had planted roses so many years ago. But then I realize it doesn't matter. How can it not matter? Michael asked with genuine curiosity. It doesn't matter if what we feel is nostalgia, idealization, or true love. What matters is that, for the first time in decades, I feel alive, I feel valuable, I feel like a woman who deserves to be courted, admired, and respected. I turned to look at him. When was the last time I felt like that? When was the last time someone made me feel special just for being myself? Michael lowered his head, ashamed. I never made you feel that way, did I? I always took you for granted, as something that would always be available no matter how I treated you. Exactly. And not just you, Michael. Your father, too, towards the end of our marriage, started to see me only as the woman who cooked, cleaned, and took care of him when he was sick. I stopped being Carol and became just Frank's wife, and then Michael's mother. At that moment, my phone rang. It was Stephen, calling at the time we had agreed upon, as always. I looked at Michael, who nodded for me to answer. Hello, beautiful. Stephen's voice came through the phone, and I immediately felt that familiar warmth spreading through my chest. How was your day? Interesting, I replied, smiling despite the tension. My son is here. Michael, would you like to say hello to Stephen? Michael froze for a moment, but then nodded slowly. I put the phone on speaker. Stephen, this is Michael, my son. Michael, this is Stephen Herrera. Hello, Michael, Stephen said with a warm voice and no trace of awkwardness. Your mother has told me a lot about you. It must be difficult for you that your mom is planning this trip. Michael cleared his throat nervously. Yes, sir, it's complicated. But I'm starting to understand that my mother deserves to be happy, even if it means big changes in our lives. What a mature response, Stephen replied with approval. I'll tell you something, Michael. I have 3 children, all adults, and it took them years to understand that their parents are whole people with their own needs and desires, not just eternal providers of support and resources. Michael looked at me with surprise. It was clear he hadn't expected Stephen to be so direct, yet so understanding. Mr. Herrera, Michael continued, may I ask what your intentions are with my mother? Stephen chuckled softly. That's a fair question. My intentions are to get to know the woman that the girl I fell in love with 40 years ago became. My intentions are to show her beautiful places, introduce her to my children, cook for her, listen to her stories, and perhaps, if we both decide we want to, build a deep friendship or something more. And what if things don't work out as you expect? Michael asked. Then we will have had a beautiful adventure. We will have closed a chapter that was left open for decades, and your mother will have had a well-deserved vacation in California. There's no pressure, Michael. No unrealistic expectations. Just two older people giving themselves a chance to rediscover joy. Michael visibly relaxed. Thank you for being so honest, sir. Call me Stephen, please. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to speak with your mother alone for a moment. Michael nodded and went into the living room, giving me privacy for my phone call. How do you feel after talking to him? I asked Stephen once we were alone. I feel good. He seems to be a young man going through a period of growth. That speaks well of how you raised him, Carol. Children who never face difficulties never learn to be resilient. His words reassured me more than I expected. Stephen, are you sure you want to involve a woman with so much family drama in your quiet life? Carol, dear, we all have family drama at our age. One of my sons got divorced last year and moved back into my house with his two young children. My daughter is going through a midlife crisis and calls crying every Tuesday. My youngest son is battling a video game addiction that's affecting his marriage. He laughed softly. Family drama is part of life. The difference is how we handle it. And how do you handle it? With clear boundaries, with tough love, and by always remembering that my children are adults responsible for their own decisions and consequences. Something it seems you are learning to do as well. After hanging up with Stephen, Michael and I continued talking late into the night. He told me more details about his therapy, about how he was learning to identify behavioral patterns he had repeated for years without realizing it. Do you know what was the hardest thing to accept in therapy? He asked me as we drank a second cup of coffee. What's that? That it wasn't just that I was lazy or immature. It was that I had developed an emotional addiction to being rescued. Every time someone solved a problem for me, every time they gave me money or got me out of a jam, I felt a kind of euphoric relief. It was like a drug. His words struck me deeply. And how are you supposed to break that addiction? By facing the consequences of my actions without seeking a rescue. When I lost the last job, my first instinct was to come running to you with a sad story. But this time, instead, I slept in my car for 3 days until I got the cleaning job. You slept in your car? I asked with automatic motherly concern. Yes. And it was one of the most important experiences of my life. For the first time, I truly understood what it means to not have a safety net, what it means for my actions to have real consequences. He looked me directly in the eyes. Mom, during those 3 nights, I thought a lot about you. I thought about all the times you had to choose between your needs and mine, and you had always chosen mine. That's what mothers do, Michael. No, Mom. That's what mothers who haven't learned to set healthy boundaries do. And that's what sons who have never learned to be responsible adults do. He leaned forward. The therapist helped me understand that by constantly rescuing me, you were unintentionally depriving me of the opportunity to grow. His words hurt, but they also freed me. For years, I had felt guilty every time I considered saying no to Michael. Every time I thought about putting my own needs first. Now I understood that my generosity had actually been a way of controlling him, of keeping him dependent on me. So what happens now? I asked softly. Now I'm going to prove, first to myself and then to you, that I can be a responsible adult. I'm going to pay my own bills, make my own decisions, face my own problems. And when you come back from California, if you decide to come back, I'm going to be a son you can be proud of. And if I decide to stay in California? Michael smiled, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine joy in his smile instead of manipulation. Then I'm going to be happy for you. I'll visit when I can. I'll call you every week, and I'll live my own life knowing that my mother is finally living hers. The day of my departure dawned with a clear sky and a gentle breeze that seemed to whisper promises of adventures to come. Michael arrived early to take me to the airport, and for the first time in years, there was no tension between us. He had brought flowers, a small bouquet of white daisies he knew were my favorite, and a sealed letter. Don't open it until you're on the plane, he said with a shy smile. It's something I needed to tell you, but it's easier for me to write than to say. During the drive to the airport, we talked about everyday things, the weather, the news, his plans for the week. It was a normal conversation between a mother and son, something we hadn't had in years. There were no pleas, no drama, no attempts at emotional manipulation. Just a quiet conversation between two adults who love each other but finally understand healthy boundaries. Mom, he said when we got to the airport, I want you to know that no matter what happens in California, this was already worth it. What do you mean? Seeing you like this, seeing you excited, nervous, happy. I haven't seen you shine like this in years. He helped me get my suitcase out of the car, a suitcase I had carefully packed with my best dresses, including a new coral pink one I had bought especially for this trip. At the airport, Michael walked me to the security gate. When it was time to say goodbye, we hugged with an intensity we hadn't shared since he was a little boy. "I love you, Mom," he whispered in my ear. "Have fun, fall in love, be happy. You deserve it more than anyone in the world. I love you too, son, and I'm proud of the man you're becoming." Once on the plane, I opened Michael's letter with trembling hands. His handwriting, which had always been sloppy, looked more mature, more careful. "Mom, these past few days I've been thinking about all the times you were heroic without me even noticing. When you worked double shifts to pay for my school books. When you sold your new sewing machine to buy me a bicycle. When you pretended not to be hungry so I could have more to eat. When you stayed up all night taking care of me when I was sick. All those moments of silent love that I took for granted. Now I understand that being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing yourself until you disappear. It means loving enough to teach independence. It means being brave enough to let go when it's time. Thank you for finally loving me enough to let me grow. Fly high, Mom, literally and figuratively. With all my love and respect, Michael. P.S. Stephen is lucky to know the most extraordinary woman in the world. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I put the letter in my purse. Through the airplane window, I could see the clouds stretching out infinitely, and for the first time in decades, I felt that my future was just as infinite. Stephen was waiting for me at the San Diego airport with a bouquet of yellow roses and a smile I recognized immediately, even though it had more wrinkles and his hair was completely white. When he saw me, his face lit up with the same joy I remembered from our college days. "Carol," he said as we hugged, "you're even more beautiful than I remembered." The days that followed were like living in a dream. Stephen took me to see the Pacific coast, where for the first time in my life, I saw the ocean stretching to the horizon. He introduced me to his children, who welcomed me with a genuine warmth that moved me deeply. His youngest daughter, Carmen, told me, "Dad hasn't smiled like this since Mom died. Thank you for bringing the joy back to him." Stephen cooked for me every night. Elaborate dinners we savored on his deck while watching the sunset. We talked for hours about our lives, our fulfilled and unfulfilled dreams, our fears and hopes. It was as if the 40 years that had passed vanished when we were together. "Do you know what I like most about being with you?" he asked one night as we walked along the beach. "What's that?" "That when I'm with you, I'm not Margaret's widower. I'm not the worried father of 3 adult children. I'm not the retired engineer. I'm just Stephen, the man who fell in love with a brilliant girl 40 years ago and never forgot her." His words reached my soul because they expressed exactly how I felt. With him, I wasn't Michael's long-suffering mother. I wasn't Frank's widow. I wasn't the tired seamstress. I was just Carol, a woman with stories to tell, dreams to chase, and love to give. At the end of my month in California, Stephen made me a proposal that changed my perspective on what was possible at 70. "Carol, I don't want this to end. I know it's crazy. I know we're just getting to know each other again after so many years, but I want you to consider moving to California. Not to get married right away, not to live together if you don't want to, but to give ourselves the chance to build something beautiful in this stage of our lives." My first instinct was to think of all the reasons why it was impossible. My house, my few friends, my life back home. But then I thought of Michael, of his letter, of his words about flying high. I thought of Victoria, who had likely never respected me. I thought of all the years I had lived for others, postponing my own dreams. "And what if things don't work out?" I asked. "Then we'll have had a beautiful adventure. But, Carol, what if they do? What if after a lifetime of putting others first, you finally get the chance to be completely happy?" That night, I called Michael to tell him about Stephen's proposal. His response surprised me and filled me with pride. "Mom, are you happy with him?" "Happier than I've been in decades." "Does he treat you well? Does he respect you? Does he make you feel valued?" "Every day, then stay. Build the life you deserve. I'm going to be okay. In fact, I'll be better knowing that you're finally living for yourself." 6 months later, I was packing my most cherished belongings, preparing to move permanently to California. Michael helped me with the entire process, demonstrating a maturity and responsibility that filled me with hope for his future. "You know what's the most ironic part of all this?" he said as we packed family photos. "What's that?" "That by letting you go, I feel like I'm finally getting you back. Not as the mother who constantly rescues me, but as the extraordinary woman you always were, but who I never bothered to truly know." As I write this story from Stephen's deck, watching the Pacific Ocean and waiting for him to return from the market where he's gone to buy ingredients for the dinner we'll cook together, I reflect on everything that has changed. Michael is successfully building his own life. He got a promotion at work, moved into a better apartment, and is dating a woman who challenges him to be a better person instead of enabling his dependency. Victoria, he told me, married an older man who can support her lifestyle, which is probably for the best for everyone. And I finally learned that it's never too late to be happy. I learned that self-love isn't selfishness, but the foundation for loving others in a healthy way. I learned that a 70-year-old woman can have adventures, can fall in love, can start over. Stephen and I got married last month in a small ceremony on the beach, with his children and Michael as witnesses. Michael cried throughout the entire ceremony, but they were tears of joy. "I never thought I'd see my mother marry for love," he told me afterward. "I always assumed your marriage to Dad was just for convenience and family. Now, when I look back at that terrible night when Victoria humiliated me in my own home, I see it as the greatest gift I could have ever received. Because it was that humiliation that finally woke me up, that showed me I deserved more, that gave me the courage to pursue the happiness I thought I had lost forever. And you? What would you do if life gave you a second chance to be completely happy? Would you have the courage to take it, no matter what others think? Because, believe me, it's never too late to start over." My daughter-in-law dropped off my 5-year-old granddaughter at my house for one night. The next morning, my granddaughter whispered to me, "Grandma, Mommy said I can't tell you what I saw at home." I asked her, "Sweetheart, what was it that you saw?" Her answer made me call the police immediately. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like it, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge. I want to know how far it has traveled. I still clearly remember that evening, when the yellowish glow of the streetlights fell on the porch and cast trembling shadows from the bare trees, which seemed to mirror my own heart at that moment. I lived in a small house on the outskirts of Phoenix, where every corner was soaked in memories of days gone by. That night, my daughter-in-law, Jenna, brought my granddaughter Lily over. She said she had to work the night shift, an excuse I had heard countless times before. But this time, something was different, like a draft of cold air seeping through a crack in the door that made me shiver. Jenna stood on the threshold, hesitating to come inside as she usually did. Her hands were clutching the handles of her purse, her knuckles so tight they were white. Her eyes darted nervously down the street, as if searching for some invisible silhouette in the darkness. "You don't mind, do you?" she asked me, her voice trembling, repeating the same question for the third time, even though I had already nodded and smiled to reassure her. I looked into her eyes, trying to find a trace of the sweet daughter-in-law she once was, but I only found a tension I couldn't explain. Next to Jenna, Lily, my little granddaughter, hid against her mother, tightly hugging her teddy bear named Milo. That bear was already worn and faded, like the years that had watched Lily grow up amidst sorrow. Her school clothes were a little wrinkled. She had probably been wearing them all day. Her big, round eyes looked at me with a mix of shyness and pleading, as if asking for a safe haven. My heart ached. How long had it been since I was last able to hug my granddaughter and hear her laugh like in the old days? As Jenna was about to leave, she leaned down to Lily and whispered, low enough but just loud enough for me to hear, "Sleep well, my love. I'll come for you tomorrow." Then she looked up, and her eyes met mine in a fleeting glance. In that instant, I felt something. Was it a warning or a plea? I wasn't sure, but that look left my chest feeling heavy. Jenna turned quickly, and her slender figure soon disappeared into the darkness, leaving me alone with Lily on the porch. I took Lily's hand and led her inside. My small kitchen was filled with the aroma of the chicken noodle soup I had prepared since the afternoon to welcome her. I placed the bowl in front of Lily and smiled. "Eat a little, honey. I made it for you." But she barely moved her spoon, her eyes lost in the bowl. "I'm not hungry, Grandma," she murmured in a tiny voice, as if she were afraid of bothering me. I tried to keep smiling, but inside, I was hurting. My Lily, the girl who used to chat excitedly about school, now seemed like a silent shadow. All evening, Lily snuggled on the sofa, hugging Milo tightly, her gaze fixed on the screen where brightly colored cartoons were playing. But I knew she wasn't really watching them. Her eyes were empty, as if lost in a world I couldn't enter. I sat beside her, wanting to ask her questions, to get closer to her. But every time I tried to speak, I saw that distance in her eyes, and I fell silent. Maybe, I thought, all she needed was time to feel safe. That night, I made her bed next to mine in the small bedroom where I still keep the old bed of my son, Michael. Lily lay down quietly, hugging Milo, with her back to the wall. In the silence, I could clearly hear her sighs, heavy, like those of an adult tired of life. Those sighs reminded me of my own sleepless nights after Michael's passing, when I could only hear the painful beats of my own heart. I wanted to hug Lily, to tell her that I would always be there, but I was afraid of scaring her. So I stayed still, listening and praying for her to have a peaceful sleep. But my own sleep was restless. Around midnight, I was startled awake by Lily's sobs. The little girl was dreaming, her voice broken and trembling. "Grandma, I'm so scared, don't leave me." I hurried to sit up, placing my hand on her shoulder. But Lily was still asleep, her brow furrowed and her lips tight, as if trying to hold back her fear. I gently stroked her hair and whispered, "I'm right here, my love. I'm not going anywhere." But inside me, a vague worry began to grow, like a cold wind slipping through my fingers. The next morning, the dawn light filtered through the crack in the window, painting warm, golden rays on the floor. I got up early, went quietly into the kitchen, and tried to create a familiar atmosphere to dispel the heaviness of the previous night. The eggs sizzled in the pan, the smell of toast and warm milk spreading throughout the small kitchen. I wanted Lily to wake up and feel that warmth, just as she used to with Michael every morning when my son was little. But deep down, I knew that nothing was the same anymore. Lily came out of the room, her hair tangled, her eyes swollen and red as if she had been crying a lot. She was still hugging her bear, Milo, tightly, as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. I tried to smile, speaking in a soft voice. "Honey, did you sleep well last night?" Lily looked down, her lips pressed together, not answering right away. I continued flipping the eggs in the pan, trying to make my voice sound light. "I made you scrambled eggs and warm milk. Do you want to sit and have breakfast with me?" The little girl hesitated, then sat down at the table, but without letting go of the teddy bear. I put the plate in front of her, silently wishing she would eat a little, if only to reassure me. But then, Lily murmured, in a voice as soft as a breath, just loud enough for my entire world to stop. "Grandma, Mommy told me not to tell you what I saw at the house." My hand froze in midair, the spatula about to fall. I turned slowly, placed the spatula on the counter, and tried to keep my voice from trembling. "Honey, don't be afraid. What was it that you saw?" I knelt in front of Lily, looking into her clear eyes, which were now filled with tears. She bit her lip, as if fighting between fear and the need to speak. And then, with a trembling voice, each word tore my heart apart. "There's a little girl, locked in the basement of the house, Grandma. She never stops crying. She says her hands hurt a lot." I knows. Clang. The metal spoon fell from my hand onto the tile floor. The sharp sound echoed in the silence. The glass of milk on the table wobbled, spilling a white stream. I was paralyzed, unable to believe what I had just heard. Lily's terrified eyes looked at me, as if asking for help, as if she had just released a secret too big to carry any longer. I wanted to say something, to ask more, but my throat closed up, as if someone were squeezing it tightly. Lily burst into tears and threw herself into my arms, burying her face in my shoulder. Her small body trembled uncontrollably, like a little bird caught in a storm. I hugged her tightly, feeling each of her agitated breaths, but in my mind, 1,000 questions were screaming. A girl locked up? In Jenna's house? How could that be possible? I wanted to believe Lily had just imagined it, that it was a child's nightmare, but her eyes, the fear so clear on her little face, told me this was no fairy tale. I gently stroked her tangled hair, trying to calm her, but my mind had already traveled back to days past, when the memory of my small family was still intact, as bright as the Arizona Sunday. Years ago, this house wasn't as quiet as it is now. It was full of laughter, of voices, and of those familiar aromas that came from the kitchen. I perfectly remember those weekend afternoons when Michael, my son, would come home with a smile as radiant as the Sunday. My son, a tall and strong engineer, always radiated that warm energy, as if he could dispel any shadow. "Mom, today I made the whole crew burst out laughing on the construction site." He would usually begin his stories, while taking off his dusty boots and lifting Lily onto his shoulders. Lily, so tiny then, just learning to walk, would laugh out loud when her father tossed her into the air, her little hands waving as if she wanted to touch the sky. Jenna, my daughter-in-law, was a sweet girl back then, with a smile that shone like a sunflower. She and I used to spend hours in the kitchen, preparing traditional dishes together. Green chili stew was a favorite of ours. I taught her how to roast the chilies, how to toast the cumin until it released its aroma, and we would chat animatedly while we cooked. "Mom, do you think Michael will like this dish?" she used to ask, her eyes shining with joy. I would smile, joking. "If Michael doesn't enjoy what we've made, I'll scold him myself." Those moments, so simple and warm, were like precious jewels in my memory, treasures I thought would last forever. Family dinners were the time I cherished most. Michael would sit at the head of the table, telling funny anecdotes from the construction site, from someone dropping a bucket of concrete mix to the times the whole crew sang at the top of their lungs during their break. Lily, a little girl sitting on his lap, would listen attentively with her huge eyes, sometimes interrupting with innocent questions. "Daddy, is that truck as big as our house?" I would just sit there, watching my little family, my heart full of peace. There were moments when I told myself that I was a fortunate woman, with a complete family, even though life was never simple. But everything shattered on a rainy night marked by fate. I still remember that early morning when the phone rang insistently, tearing me from my sleep. The voice on the other end was trembling as it gave me the news that Michael had been in an accident. His car lost control on a slippery road and went over a ravine in the dark. I stood motionless, clutching the receiver, feeling my whole world crumbling beneath my feet. "No, it can't be," I murmured. But the cruel truth would never change. Michael, my son, the light of my life, was gone forever, leaving a void impossible to fill. Michael's funeral was held on a gray day, with a drizzle that fell like tears from the sky. I held Lily, who was just 2 years old, against my chest. The confused little girl didn't yet understand that her father was gone forever. "Where's Daddy, Grandma?" Lily asked, in a voice so clear it made me want to break down and cry. I hugged her tighter and whispered, "Daddy is in a very faraway place, but he's always watching you, my love." Jenna was there, a few steps away from me, but she seemed to belong to another world. Her eyes were empty, her face as pale as a stone statue. I wanted to go to her, to take my daughter-in-law's hand. But something in her gaze stopped me, a pain too great, too deep, that I didn't know how to reach. After Michael's death, this house was shrouded in a gloomy fog. The smile vanished from Jenna's face. She became quiet, reserved. She would spend hours locked in her room. Some days I would hear her sobbing behind the closed door, but every time I knocked to go in, she would answer me coldly, "I'm fine, don't worry, Mom." I wanted to believe that Jenna would get over it, that time would heal her wounds, but I was wrong. The pain not only pushed her away from me, but it also turned her into someone I no longer recognized. Not long after, Jenna decided to move to an apartment in another neighborhood. "I need a fresh start, Mom," she told me in a monotone voice, avoiding my eyes. I understood that she not only wanted to leave this house, but also to escape the memories of Michael, the memories that every corner and every object brought back. I didn't blame her, but my heart broke when Lily had to go with her. The little girl was the only light I had left in my life, and now I could only see her on the few weekends they let her stay with me. The house became huge and cold. I kept Michael's picture on the wall, next to a family photo from a day out, when Lily was just a baby, sitting on her father's shoulders, laughing her head off. Every night I would sit in front of that photo and whisper to my son, "Michael, what should I do? I miss you so much." But only the wind whistling down the hallway answered me, reminding me that now I was left with only loneliness. In subsequent visits, I noticed that Lily was changing. Her eyes, once bright and clear, now reflected a sadness that was hard to name. She spoke less, smiled less, and whenever I tried to ask her something, she would lower her head and hug her teddy bear Milo tightly, as if it were her only shield. "I'm fine, Grandma," she always told me, but her gaze told another story. I asked Jenna about it, but she would only give me evasive answers. "Don't worry, Mom, I take good care of Lily." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think she was doing everything possible to be a good mother. But inside, a growing unease consumed me. I had no choice but to swallow my tears and watch helplessly as my granddaughter drifted further and further away. And it was then that today, that veil of secrecy was shattered by a terrifying whisper from my little Lily's mouth. I tried to calm Lily down after her confession, gently stroking her messy hair, whispering to her, "It's okay, my love. Grandma will take care of everything." But Lily just shook her head, her tear-filled eyes closing tightly, as if she wanted to hide from the world. She clutched Milo, the worn-out teddy bear that had become her only friend in these lonely days, to her chest. I wanted to ask her more, to pull out more details, but seeing her little shoulders trembling, I didn't have the courage to insist. "Come on, sweetie, rest for a little while," I said, my voice as gentle as I could make it, even though a hurricane was raging inside me. That afternoon, I decided to take Lily to school. The girl needed the familiar environment of the classroom, of her friends, to forget for a little while the fear that was consuming her. I held her hand as we walked along the familiar gravel path, but every step felt heavy. Lily remained silent the whole way, only looking up from time to time, as if she wanted to say something but didn't dare. I smiled, trying to hide the anguish that was eating me up inside. "What are you going to learn in school today?" I asked. But Lily just shook her head without answering. I knew she was carrying a weight far too heavy for her age. When we arrived at the school, I decided to stay for a moment to speak with Mrs. Davis, Lily's teacher. Mrs. Davis was a middle-aged woman with kind but sharp eyes, always attentive to her students. I found her in the teacher's lounge, where the smell of chalk and paper still lingered. "Mrs. Davis, can I talk to you for a moment?" I asked in a low voice, as if afraid someone would overhear. Mrs. Davis looked at me with a hint of concern. "Of course, Carol. Is something wrong with Lily?" I sat in an old wooden chair in the room, and I told her what Lily had said to me that morning. My voice trembled when I mentioned the girl locked in the basement. "Mrs. Davis listened attentively, her brow furrowed and her hands clasped tightly. When I finished, she hesitated for a few seconds, as if choosing each word carefully. "Carol, I've also noticed that Lily has changed lately. She gets scared easily. Sometimes she just zones out in class, unable to concentrate." She paused, looking at me with unease. "And, in art class, she's been making some very strange drawings. It's almost always a little girl alone in a dark room, and behind her are messy black lines, as if they were bars." My heart sank, as if someone were squeezing it. Those black lines, like bars. Mrs. Davis's words were a direct hit, confirming my fears. "Do you think that's something out of the ordinary?" I asked, almost in a whisper. Mrs. Davis shook her head, her gaze unsettled. "I can't say for sure, but I'm worried about her emotional state. Maybe she's going through something very difficult." I nodded, feeling the floor crumble beneath my feet. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis," I said, getting up, though my legs trembled as if they couldn't support me. On my way home, I walked like a ghost. The images of Lily's drawings, the girl in the dark room and the black lines like bars, wouldn't leave me. I wondered, what had Lily seen? Did a locked-up girl really exist? Or was it just the imagination of a deeply hurt little girl? But her frightened eyes, her trembling voice, wouldn't let me dismiss the story. I needed more clues, more proof to understand what was happening. In the afternoon, I sat on the porch, watching the red bougainvillea petals fall in the yard. The wind was blowing hard, and I shivered, as if it carried a warning. Suddenly, I saw Mr. Henderson, the kind elderly neighbor, pass by. Mr. Henderson was well liked in the neighborhood, a widower with a sharp gaze, as if nothing on that cul-de-sac could escape him. Seeing my downcast expression, he stopped, resting his wooden cane on the step. "Carol, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." I smiled weakly, trying to hide my worry. "I'm just a little tired, Mr. Henderson. How are you?" But he wasn't fooled. He sat on the wooden bench next to me and, in a grave voice, said, "Carol, I know you're not one to worry about trivial things. Is something wrong with Lily?" I hesitated, not knowing if I should share it or not. But remembering Lily's scared look, I decided to tell him, just a part of it, enough to feel him out. "Lily told me something strange, about a girl at Jenna's house. I don't know what to think anymore." Mr. Henderson frowned. His eyes sharpened. After a moment of silence, he lowered his voice, as if afraid someone would hear. "Carol, there's something I haven't told anyone. One night last week, I couldn't sleep, and I went out into the yard. I saw Jenna hurry into the house, holding a little girl's hand. I'm sure it wasn't Lily. It was very late, past midnight." He paused. He looked at me, as if hesitating to continue. I also heard a muffled sob. At the time, I thought it might be Lily, sick and crying. But now that I hear you, it's starting to seem strange. Mr. Henderson's words struck me like lightning. My heart was pounding. My hands gripped the edge of my coat. "Are you sure, Mr. Henderson? Did you get a good look at her?" I asked with a trembling voice. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. I couldn't make out her face, but it wasn't Lily. She was smaller, with shorter hair. I didn't want to say anything, for fear of misjudging Jenna, but be careful. I nodded, feeling as if loose pieces were beginning to fit into a terrifying picture in my mind. That evening, Jenna came to pick up Lily. I stood at the door, watching her come in, my heart heavy. Her gaze, sharp as a knife, scanned me from head to toe, as if assessing how much I knew. "Thanks for watching, Lily," she said coldly, without a hint of her former warmth. Lily hid behind her mother, hugging Milo, her teddy bear, tightly, looking at me with worried eyes. I wanted to keep her there, to ask more, but Jenna's glare stopped me. She took Lily by the hand and pulled her away quickly, without another word. I remained on the threshold, watching their silhouettes disappear down the street, my heart heavy. At dawn, I woke up with an unbearable weight on my chest, as if the whole world was against me. I had decided to step out of my comfort zone and face the truth, even if it hurt. I took the first bus downtown, sitting silently in the back, looking through the fogged-up window. The familiar streets passed by, but that day they felt distant, cold. The police station came into view, an old building with stained walls. I went inside, and the air, thick with the smell of damp paper and burnt coffee, intensified my anxiety. I stood in front of the front desk, my trembling hands clutching my coat, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to speak with whoever is in charge," I told the young officer who was glancing through some records. He looked at me with a spark of curiosity and then led me to a small room where Detective Morales was sitting behind a scratched wooden desk. Morales was a middle-aged man with a hardened face and tired eyes, as if he had witnessed too many painful stories. I sat down, took a deep breath, and began to tell him everything. I spoke of Lily's whisper, of the girl locked in the basement, of the strange drawings Mrs. Davis described, and of Mr. Henderson's account of the unknown girl who appeared in the night. My voice trembled, but I tried to speak clearly, as if each word were a brick building a wall of truth. "Sir, I know this sounds crazy, but Lily isn't lying. My granddaughter is scared, and I believe something very bad is happening." I finished, looking fixedly into Morales's eyes, hoping he could see the urgency in mine. Morales listened, his hand tapping a steady rhythm on the desk, but when I finished, he slowly shook his head. "Ma'am, I understand your concern," he said in a flat, emotionless voice. "But all we have is the word of a child, a few drawings, and a neighbor's testimony. That's not enough legal ground to request a search warrant for your daughter-in-law's house." His words were like a bucket of cold water in my face. I felt the blood drain from my body. I clenched my hands tightly to stop the trembling. "What if there really is a child in danger, sir?" I pleaded, my voice breaking. "If Lily is telling the truth and we do nothing, what will happen to that girl?" Morales sighed, and a faint glimmer of compassion appeared in his eyes. "We'll file your report," he replied with the same coolness. "But for now, you have to wait. We need more concrete evidence." I wanted to scream, to say that time waits for no one, that every minute could be a minute of danger for the girl Lily spoke of. But I just nodded, got up, and felt that my legs could barely hold me. "Thank you, sir," I murmured, though inside I just wanted to scream with helplessness. Leaving the police station, I felt as if the whole world had turned its back on me. The midday sun was beating down, but I only felt cold. I walked to the bus stop with my mind blank, repeating to myself over and over, "What do I do now?" I had hoped the police would act immediately, that they would believe Lily's words. But now I was left with only loneliness and the fear of not being able to protect either my granddaughter or that nameless child. That afternoon, I went to the grocery store to buy some food, trying to keep busy with everyday tasks to stay calm. But as I walked past the familiar aisles, I heard the whispers. "Old Carol is losing it. She must have some problems upstairs," one of the cashiers muttered to her colleague, loud enough for me to hear. "Who accuses their own daughter-in-law of kidnapping kids?" I stopped, feeling a dagger in my heart. I turned towards her, but she immediately looked down, pretending to be busy with the items on her counter. I knew in that instant. Jenna had acted faster than I thought. She had already spread the word throughout the neighborhood, saying I was delusional from missing Lily so much that I had invented a story to get my granddaughter back. I returned home with my heart as heavy as a rock. I sat on the porch, watching the bougainvillea flowers fall, trying to find some peace. But the tragedy reached its peak that very night. When the sun went down, I heard a car pull up to the gate. Jenna came to get Lily, but this time she didn't come into the house as usual. She stayed in the yard, hugging Lily tightly, crying inconsolably in front of her brother, Kevin. "She's slandering me, Kevin," Jenna cried, her voice broken. "She says I kidnap children, that she wants to ruin my life. I just want to take care of Lily, and she does this to me." Kevin, a tall, rough man, came up to me, pointing his finger and growling. "Ma'am, please leave my family alone. Who do you think you are, slandering my sister like that?" I stood motionless, my heart squeezed as if it were being strangled. The neighbors began to gather on the street, and all those looks of curiosity, pity, and distrust were fixed on me. "Carol must miss her granddaughter too much. That's why she's making things up," someone murmured. "Poor thing, she's getting old," another agreed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say that I wasn't crazy, that Lily had seen something awful, but the words got stuck in my throat. I just stood there, motionless, feeling the whole world turn against me. From the car, Lily turned to look at me through the window. Her eyes were full of sadness and desperation, as if to say, "Grandma, save me." I wanted to run to her, to hug her, not to let her go, but my legs were rooted to the spot. Jenna started the engine, and the car drove away, leaving my granddaughter behind and me alone, exposed under the stares of the neighborhood. I heard the murmurs behind me, from people who were once close neighbors and now looked at me like a delusional old woman. I might have been alone, but deep down, I knew I couldn't give up. Stumbling, I went into the house after that bitter confrontation in front of the neighbors. My steps were heavy, as if chained by suspicious glances and whispers. I thought I had grown accustomed to the pain of loss, but now I felt like a dry leaf, swept away by the wind, with no strength to resist the storm. I collapsed onto the old living room armchair, my eyes fixed on Michael's portrait on the wall. My son's smile was as warm as ever, but it only tore me up more inside. "Michael, what should I do?" I whispered, my voice breaking in the quiet room. No one answered, only the whistling of the wind on the porch and the news on the television, which I wasn't listening to. The only thing I could hear was my heart screaming in silence. I stayed there, my face in my hands, feeling as if the whole world had turned its back on me. The image of Lily looking at me from the car window, with that infinite sadness, was like a knife piercing my soul. Jenna had managed to turn me into the neighborhood crazy lady. Her rumors, that I was hallucinating because I missed my granddaughter too much, were like needles stabbing at my pride. I had pinned all my hopes on the visit to the police station, but I only received the cold refusal of Detective Morales. "There's not enough evidence," he had told me. How could I wait when Lily was terrified, when perhaps another unknown girl was in danger. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, my eyes open, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ticking of the clock that marked every second of my helplessness. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily's gaze, or I heard her terrifying whisper again. "There's a little girl, locked in the basement." I turned over, hugging the pillow where Lily had slept the night before, as if it still held her scent, as if it could give me the strength to go on. But all I felt was an icy void in my chest. I asked myself, "Carol, are you doing the right thing? Or are you really just a delusional old woman, like they say?" The next morning, I still tried to go to the grocery store as usual, hoping the hustle and bustle would help distract me. But when I entered, I felt a noticeable change. The usual vendors, those who used to greet me with a friendly smile, now fell silent when they saw me from a distance. They would lean towards each other, murmuring, and their glances were a mix of pity and distance. Poor Carol. She must miss her granddaughter so much she's lost her mind. I heard a vegetable seller whisper to the one next to her. I lowered my head, quickened my pace, and pretended not to have heard, but each word hit me like a hammer blow to the chest. I wanted to scream, to tell them I wasn't crazy, that Lily had seen something terrible, but I knew that doing so would only make everyone believe Jenna's story even more. On my way home, I ran into Rose, my closest friend in the neighborhood. She was standing at her door with a wicker basket in her hands, and her face filled with concern when she saw me. Unlike the others, Rose didn't avoid me. She came over, led me to a corner by the fence, and squeezed my hands tightly. "Carol, I know you," she said in a low but firm voice. "I don't believe you'd make this up. I saw Lily's eyes last night when Jenna took her. The child was terrified, Carol. If you give up now, that regret will follow you for the rest of your life." Her words shot through me like a bolt of lightning. They didn't dispel my despair, but they did ignite a tiny spark of hope. I took her hand, tears welling up in my eyes. "Rose, thank you," I whispered. "But I don't know what to do anymore. Nobody believes me." Rose squeezed my hand tighter, with a determination in her eyes that I hadn't seen in myself for a long time. "You have to keep going, Carol, for Lily and for yourself. Don't let the gossip make you back down." I nodded, though my heart was still heavy. Rose was right. I couldn't give up. But what could I do when I felt the entire world was against me? That afternoon, I started trimming the bougainvillea in the yard, seeking a little peace and routine. The red petals fell to the ground like little drops of blood, heightening my anxiety. Suddenly, I heard hurried footsteps. Mr. Henderson, the elderly neighbor, appeared at the gate with a bag of coffee in his hand and a mysterious look on his face. "Carol, you have to see this," he said, lowering his voice as if afraid someone would hear him. I stopped what I was doing, my heart tightening. "What is it, Mr. Henderson?" I asked, moving closer. He led me inside, closed the door securely, and pulled an old cell phone from his pocket. "I asked my nephew at the corner store to check the security cameras from last week," he explained, his voice trembling with excitement. "Look, Carol, I think you need to see this." The screen lit up, showing blurry, grainy images. I held my breath and stared at the video. It was Jenna, my daughter-in-law, the one who was once part of my family, leading an unknown little girl by the hand, hurrying into her house in the middle of the night. The little girl was wearing worn-out pajamas, her hair was tangled, and she was smaller than Lily, walking clumsily as if she were afraid. I, Carol, a 65-year-old woman, felt the ground open up beneath my feet. Lily's whisper about a girl locked in the basement was no longer the confused story of a child. It was true, and this video was the proof I had prayed for. I looked at Mr. Henderson, my voice catching. "Mr. Henderson, are you sure? Could there be a mistake?" I asked, although deep down I already knew the answer. He nodded firmly, his gaze more serious than ever. "There can't be a mistake, Carol. I saw that scene with my own eyes. I just didn't realize the camera recorded it too. I was in the yard that night, and I know it wasn't Lily." His words were like a stab, painful but also strengthening. I gripped the phone tightly, as if it were the only life raft in the middle of the storm that was drowning me. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I whispered, on the verge of tears. "You don't know how important this is to me." Without a second's hesitation, I decided I had to take this video to the police station immediately. I couldn't wait any longer. Every minute that passed was a minute that the girl in the video, and perhaps Lily too, was still in danger. I quickly put on an old coat, covered my head with a scarf, and left Mr. Henderson's house with my heart on fire. The gravel path leading to the station seemed longer today, each step heavy but filled with determination. I thought of Lily, of her frightened eyes, and of Michael, my son, who would surely want me to protect his daughter at all costs. When I entered the police station, the air still smelled of old papers and burnt coffee, but this time I didn't feel afraid. I had proof, and I wouldn't leave until they acted. I asked to speak with Detective Morales immediately. The young officer at the reception desk looked at me, perhaps noticing the urgency in my eyes, and quickly led me to the familiar room. Morales was sitting behind the desk, his face hard and his eyes tired. "Carol, you're here again," he said with a hint of surprise. "Is there something new?" I took a deep breath. I placed Mr. Henderson's phone on the desk and said, "Sir, I have proof. Please, watch this video." I played the clip, and the image of Jenna and the unknown girl appeared on the screen. I recounted what Mr. Henderson had seen, what Lily had told me, and also the strange drawings she had made in school. My voice trembled, but I tried to sound clear and firm. "That is not Lily, and I don't know who this girl is, but I think she's in danger." Morales watched the video, frowning slightly, but his gaze was still full of doubt. "She could just be looking after a friend's daughter," he said in a monotone voice. His words were another stab that made my heart shrink. I couldn't let him dismiss this evidence. I leaned forward, almost pleading. "I'm begging you, investigate further. That little girl is not from our neighborhood. I've lived there for so many years. I know it. And Lily, my granddaughter, is terrified. She talks about a girl locked in a basement crying, saying her hand hurts. Please believe me." Perhaps the urgency in my voice or the desperation in my eyes made Morales hesitate. He signaled to a young officer nearby. "Check if there are any missing person reports that match this girl's description," he ordered seriously. The officer nodded, checked the files, and began typing quickly on the computer. I sat there, my heart pounding, my hands gripping the edge of my coat, as if holding on to my last hope. After a few minutes, the young officer suddenly exclaimed, "Detective, look at this. The girl in the video matches the description of Sophie, 5 years old, reported missing 2 weeks ago from the next town over." He showed the computer screen to Morales, and I saw his face change immediately. His tired eyes now shone with a seriousness I had never seen. He stood up abruptly and said firmly, "Verify this information immediately. Contact the precinct in the neighboring town. Request the complete disappearance file." My heart was pounding inside my chest, as if it would burst. Here it was. This was the proof I needed. The girl's name, Sophie, was like a lightning bolt that pierced the darkness of my soul. I looked at Morales, tears about to stream down my face, but I held them back. "Thank you, sir," I whispered with a choked voice. "Thank you for listening." Morales didn't reply, just nodded, but I saw a change in his eyes. There were no more doubts, only a cold determination. At that moment, the station door burst open, and some neighbors entered with worried looks. I recognized them. Mrs. Elena, who sells tamales on the corner, and Mr. Miguel, who often plays chess with Mr. Henderson. Mrs. Elena spoke first, her voice trembling. "Detective, we heard Carol came about Jenna. We also have something to say." She hesitated for a moment and looked at me, as if asking for permission. I nodded, encouraging her to continue. "We've heard crying, strange noises from Jenna's house. Even on the nights Lily stayed with Carol. At first, we thought it was just a child's tantrums, but now we're not so sure." Mr. Miguel nodded and added, "One time I saw a light flickering in her basement, just before dawn. I didn't think anything of it, but now that I think about it, it seems strange." I nixed. Their words were like the final pieces of a puzzle, completing the terrifying picture that was already forming in my mind. I looked at Morales, hoping he would see the gravity of the situation. He nodded, and in his eyes, there was no longer a shred of doubt. "There's enough evidence, ma'am," he said in a firm voice. "We will request a search warrant immediately." I nodded as the tears finally streamed down my face. For the first time, after so many dark days, I saw a ray of hope. I returned home after leaving the police station, my mind in a knot, happy that they had finally decided to act, but also fearful of what was to come. I thought I was used to life's storms, but now I was facing a hurricane that I didn't know if I could withstand. Mr. Henderson's video, the confirmation about Sophie, and the neighbors' accounts had ignited a spark of hope, but they also made me tremble at the thought of what I was about to face. Jenna, my daughter-in-law, who was once part of my family, was now on the other side of the truth, and I didn't know what awaited me when the veil of secrecy was lifted. I couldn't sleep a wink that night. The patter of rain on the tin roof sounded like a war drum, echoing in the small house. I sat in the living room, under the yellow light that cast shadows on Michael's photo on the wall. My son's smile was still tender, but his eyes seemed to look at me, as if saying, "Mom, you have to be strong." I clasped my hands and murmured a prayer, asking for Michael's spirit to protect my granddaughter, Lily, and little Sophie, that innocent child I never knew, but who was now the reason I had to keep fighting. "Michael, help me," I said with a broken voice. "Help me protect them." "How?" I thought of Lily, of my granddaughter's frightened gaze, of the terrifying whisper in the kitchen that morning. I thought of Sophie, the girl in the video, with her torn pajamas and her faltering walk. Each image was like a stab that pained my heart, but it also gave me more determination. I couldn't let those girls suffer for another minute, but I was also afraid that when the truth came out, it would shatter what little was left of my family. Jenna, although she had changed, was still Lily's mother, the one who once called me Mom. How could I face her? How could I bear the truth that she could be involved in something so horrible? The next morning, I went to the grocery store as usual, trying to cling to my routines so as not to be overwhelmed by anxiety. But the atmosphere at the store was different. The curious glances, the whispers, followed me like a shadow. "Is Carol accusing her daughter-in-law again?" A fruit vendor muttered to the woman next to her, thinking I couldn't hear. "She must miss her granddaughter so much she's gone crazy." I lowered my head and hurried my steps, not wanting to face those looks of pity or suspicion. I bought a few necessary items, some vegetables, some bread, and quickly returned home with a heavy heart. I didn't care about the gossip anymore. I just wanted to focus on Lily, on Sophie, on what was to come. At noon, Rose, my old friend of a lifetime, arrived with a plate of still warm casserole. She entered the house, put the plate on the table, and sat beside me, squeezing my hand tightly. "Carol, be brave," she said, her voice warm but firm. "I know how much you're suffering, but the truth will come out. Don't let the talk make you back down." I looked into her eyes and found deep empathy in them. She was one of the few people who didn't turn her back on me, who didn't see me as a delusional old woman. "Rose, I'm scared," I confessed, my voice trembling. "If the truth is too terrible, I don't know how I'll face it. Lily, my granddaughter, what will become of her and her mother?" Rose squeezed my hand tighter, interrupting me. "Carol, you are the strongest woman I know. You lost Michael and still stood tall for Lily. Don't doubt yourself. You are doing the right thing." Evan 4. Her words were like a small flame that warmed my frozen heart. I nodded, with tears streaming down my cheeks. "Thank you, Rose," I whispered. "I'll do my best." She smiled, gave me a pat on the shoulder, and got up to leave, leaving me with the plate of casserole that smelled delicious, but which I had no appetite to eat. Later that afternoon, Mr. Henderson approached, his face full of concern. He sat on the bench at the entrance, leaning on his cane, and spoke in a low voice, as if afraid someone would hear him. "Carol, last night I heard strange noises again at Jenna's house," he said, his gaze serious. "It sounded like someone was banging on a door, and then I heard muffled sobs. I didn't dare get closer, but I'm sure something is wrong." His words tied a knot in my chest. I thought of Sophie, of what Lily had said, and I felt as if an invisible hand were strangling me. "Mr. Henderson, do you think that little girl is still there?" I asked with a broken voice. He nodded, his eyes filled with unease. "I don't know, Carol, but I hope the police clear everything up soon." I took his hand, thanking him once again for not turning his back on me. Mr. Henderson's news left me even more unsettled. but it also reinforced my conviction that what Lily said was true. I couldn't let that child, Sophie, continue to suffer. I had to act, even if only a tiny spark of hope remained. That night I called Mrs. Davis, Lily's teacher, on the phone. I told her what was happening with a trembling voice. "Mrs. Davis, if anything happens to Lily, please take care of her for me. I don't know what might happen tomorrow, but I need to know she'll be safe." Mrs. Davis agreed immediately, without hesitation. "Carol, don't worry. I will keep an eye on Lily. You do what you have to do." Her words relieved me a little, although the anguish still weighed heavily on my chest. Before going to bed, I carefully put away my documents, the family records, and also Lily's strange drawings in a small bag. I didn't know what the next day would bring, but I wanted to be ready for anything. I sat in front of Michael's photo, whispering, "Son, I'm doing what I can. I won't let Lily suffer anymore." I closed my eyes, seeking a little peace, but my heart was still in turmoil. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, the phone rang sharply, breaking the silence of the house. I jumped, answering immediately, my heart pounding. It was the voice of Detective Morales, brief but firm. "Carol, tomorrow at dawn we are going to search Jenna's house. Be ready." I sank into the chair, the receiver trembling in my hands. "Thank you, sir," I murmured with a choked voice. "I'll be ready." I hung up and looked out the window, where the rain was beating down relentlessly. Its sound was like a reminder that the real storm was about to arrive. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. The dim light barely filtered through the crack in the window. My chest felt like it was on fire, as if the whole world were pressing down on me. Today was the decisive day, the day when the painful or terrifying truth would come to light. I put on a thick coat, wrapped myself in a scarf, and with trembling hands, I tied my shoes. I looked at Michael's photo on the wall and whispered, "Son, give me strength." The image of Lily, with her frightened eyes, and that of Sophie from Mr. Henderson's video, kept running through my head, pushing me to go on even though fear paralyzed me. The sharp sound of patrol cars stopping in front of my house pulled me from my thoughts. Detective Morales got out of the car, his stern face showing no emotion. "Let's go, Carol," he said in a firm voice. I nodded, clutching the bag with the papers and Lily's drawings tightly, as if they were a lucky charm. I got into the car, remaining silent in the back seat, looking out the fogged-up window. The drive to Jenna's house seemed shorter than ever, but each second weighed like a century. I thought of Lily, of Sophie, and I wondered, will I have the strength to face the truth? We arrived at Jenna's house when the sky was still gray, with dark clouds floating above, as if heralding a storm. The cold wind blew in gusts, making the red petals of the bougainvillea fall onto the yard like drops of blood. I stood in front of the gate, my heart beating rapidly, feeling my whole body tremble. Morales knocked on the door. The sharp raps echoed in the silence. The door flew open, and Jenna appeared. Her face was pale with surprise, but only for an instant, because then her expression turned to fury. "What are you doing here?" she shouted, her voice icy, as if trying to hide a very deep fear. Morales coolly held up the search warrant in front of her. "We have a legal warrant. I'm asking you to cooperate," he said in a firm, unwavering voice. Jenna looked at the paper and then at me, with eyes that looked like knives, stabbing right into my chest. "You did this, didn't you?" She spat the words, pointing her finger at me. "You want to destroy me? You want to take Lily away from me?" I remained silent, my hands gripping the edge of my coat, not responding. I wanted to tell her that all I wanted was to protect Lily, to save little Sophie, but the words got stuck in my throat. I could only look at her, she who was once my daughter-in-law and who now seemed like a stranger. Suddenly, Kevin, Jenna's brother, rushed out of the house, his neck tense, shouting, "This is private property. You have no right. You're slandering and humiliating my family." He was a burly man, his voice roared like a cornered animal. Morales didn't bother to answer, just signaled for his team of officers to enter. I stood motionless in the yard, and through a crack in the door, I managed to see Lily huddled in a corner of the living room, hugging her teddy bear, Milo, tightly. Her little eyes were red and swollen, as if she had been crying a lot. I wanted to run to her, to tell her that her grandmother was there, that everything would be okay, but Jenna's cold glare stopped me. The police began to search every room. The sound of their boots hitting the tile floor mixed with the rustling of papers. The atmosphere was so tense, it felt like the entire house was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible. Jenna followed them, crying and screaming, "It's all my mother-in-law's fault. She wants to ruin my life. How can you believe a crazy old woman?" Her words were like knives piercing my heart. I wanted to scream that I wasn't crazy, that I only wanted to protect Lily, but I stood there, in silence, with the feeling that the whole world was against me. Morales didn't respond to her. He led his team directly to the end of the hallway, where there was a small, old iron door that led to the basement. I immediately felt the air change. Jenna's face transformed into a true expression of panic. She ran, spreading her arms to block the entrance, her voice broken. "There's nothing in there. It's just an old storage room. No one can open it." The desperation in her tone tied a knot in my chest. I knew, in that instant, that Lily had told the truth. Something horrible was hidden behind that door. One of the officers stepped forward. He calmly inserted a master key into the rusty lock. Kevin roared, trying to lunge at him to stop him, but two officers immediately restrained him. "You can't open it!" he shouted, struggling, but his strength was not enough to break free from these burly men. I almost stopped breathing. My hands clenched until they hurt. The neighbors were already gathering on the street, murmuring, their gazes fixed on the house. I heard someone say, "My God, could what Carol said be true?" But I had no room for that in my head. All my attention was on that iron door. The lock opened with a sharp click. The officer pulled hard on the door, and a chilling creak echoed, like the scream of a long-buried secret. From the deep darkness inside, a faint, trembling child's cry could be heard, like a restrained plea for help. The basement door burst open, and a gust of damp, musty air shot out, as if the darkness itself were exhaling terrifying secrets. I was standing in the yard of Jenna's house, feeling my heart stop. The soft sob from inside was faint but clear, like a plea from beyond the grave. A police officer turned on his flashlight. The beam of light swept across the stained walls, the torn cardboard boxes, and then, from a shadowy corner, a small silhouette came staggering out. It was Sophie, the girl from the video, the girl Lily had spoken of with fear in her eyes. Her hair was matted, her face covered in dust, her torn pajamas stuck to her thin body. Her left arm was crudely wrapped in a dirty rag, and her wide-open eyes stared in panic at the strangers around her. I was stunned. My legs gave way. I had to grab onto a porch column to keep from falling. The image of Sophie, so small and fragile, was like a knife to my heart. I thought of Lily, of what she must have witnessed, and tears welled up in my eyes, rolling down my cheeks. "Sophie," I whispered with a broken voice, as if saying her name could ease her pain. A female officer ran forward, lifted Sophie into her arms, holding her tightly against her chest as if to protect her. "Call for an ambulance, now!" she shouted, her voice filled with urgency. The little girl clutched an old, faded cushion, her hands trembling, as if it were the only thing left of her safe world. The neighbors crowded into the yard, all stunned. The murmurs grew like a wave. "My God, it's true. Carol was telling the truth after all," a voice said, and I could hear the regret in it. The same people who had turned their backs on me, who had called me a crazy old woman, were now standing there, heads bowed, unable to look me in the eye. But I felt no triumph, only pain. Pain for Sophie, pain for Lily, and pain for myself, watching my family break apart once more. Jenna screamed, her voice unhinged, lunging towards the policewoman holding Sophie. "No, I didn't lock her up. I was just trying to protect her," she shrieked, tears streaming down her pale face. But her voice no longer held any conviction. It was nothing more than the desperate cry of someone who knew her secret had been discovered. Kevin, Jenna's brother, was still struggling, trying to defend her, while two officers held him firmly. "This is a trap. They're setting my sister up. It's all a plan by that old woman," he yelled, pointing at me, his eyes blazing. I remained motionless, not answering, just looking at him, and then at Jenna, my soul torn. I once considered them family, but now they were like strangers, standing on the other side of the truth. Detective Morales interrupted with an icy voice. Quiet. The crime is in plain sight. He motioned for his team to continue searching the basement. They rummaged through old boxes, checked every corner, and then an officer held up a bundle of documents, his voice trembling. "Detective, you have to see this." I held my breath as I watched Morales open the package. They were notebooks, filled with strange symbols, disordered phrases about a dark sect. In one of them, I saw the name Esteban Vargas written in scrawls, next to a signature. Morales frowned, and his voice became grave. Esteban Vargas. This name sounds familiar. He was the leader of an extremist group the press exposed last year. Morales's words were like a thunderbolt, stunning both me and the crowd around us. I thought of Jenna, of the changes she went through after Michael's death, of her strange gaze, of the terrifying silence she kept whenever I asked her about Lily. How could she get involved with someone like Esteban Vargas? How could someone who was once my sweet daughter-in-law fall down such a dark path? I wanted to run to her, to ask her, to understand why, but my legs were rooted to the ground. Sophie was taken to the ambulance. The little girl was weak, her eyes still filled with panic, but her tiny voice rose like a plea. "Mommy, I want to go back to Mommy." Those words broke my heart. I thought of Sophie's mother, who was surely suffering somewhere, waiting for her daughter, and I prayed that they would soon be reunited. I looked towards Lily, saw her huddled in a corner, her eyes red, watching the ambulance drive away. I wanted to run and hug her, but Morales signaled for me to stay put, as if he knew this moment wasn't over yet. Jenna was handcuffed. 2 officers led her out of the house. As she passed by me, she stopped. Her eyes shone with hatred. "You destroyed everything," she said through gritted teeth, her voice trembling with rage and pain. I looked into her eyes, trying to find any trace of the daughter-in-law I once loved, but I only found an unfamiliar coldness. I returned home after a long day at the police station, my body exhausted, but my heart still in shock. I had been through the darkest days of my life, but now, with the truth exposed, I felt a ray of hope filter into my heart. The news of the case spread like a wildfire, and our small town suddenly became the center of attention. The press, the television stations arrived, satellite trucks filled the street, and reporters with cameras and microphones relentlessly asked about the story of Sophie, of Lily, and of me. But I didn't want to talk much. I just wanted to be by Lily's side, to hug her tightly and know that she was safe. I went to the hospital in the afternoon, where Sophie was being treated. Her parents, the Jacksons, had arrived immediately after receiving the call from the police. I stood in the hallway, looking through the glass, watching them desperately hug the daughter they thought they had lost forever, crying with choked sobs. Mrs. Jackson, a thin woman with red-rimmed eyes, held Sophie, whispering words of love, while Mr. Jackson, beside her, wiped away his tears, struggling to keep his voice steady as he thanked the doctors. That moment broke my heart, but it also filled me with a strange warmth. I thought of Lily, of the fear she had endured, and I knew that all my efforts had not been in vain. The Jacksons approached me as I stood silently in the hallway. Mrs. Jackson squeezed my hand tightly, her voice choked. "Carol, we don't know how to thank you. If it weren't for you and Lily, we might have lost our daughter forever." Mr. Jackson nodded, his eyes moist. "You gave us back the light of our lives. Sophie is everything to us." I smiled, as tears rolled down my cheeks. "I only did what anyone would do," I said with a trembling voice. "The real hero is Lily. My granddaughter had the courage to tell the truth, even though she was very scared." They nodded, squeezing my hand tighter, and in that gesture I felt a deep gratitude, like a fire warming my frozen heart. Outside the hospital entrance, I saw a group of neighbors waiting. Those who once whispered behind my back, who called me the crazy old bat, now looked at me with different eyes. Mrs. Elena, the casserole lady, approached, bowed her head, and with a trembling voice said, "Carol, we were wrong to doubt you. Please, forgive us." Mr. Miguel, who used to play chess with Mr. Henderson, also came near, his gaze full of guilt. "You did what none of us dared to do. You truly are a hero." I shook my head, smiling slightly. "I'm not a hero. I'm just a grandmother who wants to protect her granddaughter." But inside, I felt a small relief. The looks of mistrust had disappeared, replaced by respect, and I knew that, although late, the truth had triumphed. The entire community began to praise Lily as a little hero. They spoke of her bravery, of how an 8-year-old girl dared to tell the truth, even when she had to face the fear and doubt of the whole world. I listened to these words, and my heart filled with both pride and pain. Lily didn't deserve to go through this. She should have had a carefree childhood, full of laughter and worry-free days. But I knew my Lily was stronger than I imagined, and I would do everything possible to help her heal from these wounds. The police announced the preliminary results of the investigation the next day. Jenna was charged with kidnapping, unlawful detention, and ties to a dangerous sect. The notebooks found in the basement, with Esteban Vargas's signature, opened a broader investigation into a criminal network the police had been tracking for some time. Kevin, Jenna's brother, was also investigated for obstruction, though he denied everything. I heard this news on the evening newscast, sitting in the living room, hugging the pillow where Lily used to sleep tightly. I thought of Jenna, of the young woman who was once my daughter-in-law, who smiled radiantly at family dinners. What had made her change? What led her down this dark path? I had no answers, but I knew that the truth, however painful, had come to light. A few days later, my house was once again filled with laughter. For the first time after so many gray months, Lily and Sophie were playing together on the porch, under the red bougainvillea vine. Sophie was much better. Her smile had returned, although her eyes still held a faint trace of fear. Lily, with her bare Milo in her hand, ran around, laughing as Sophie tried to catch her. I watched them from the doorway, my heart warm but also heavy. I knew that their healing journey would be long, but that moment, with their laughter echoing, was a new beginning. The Jackson family came to visit me in the afternoon, bringing a bouquet of fresh flowers and a homemade pie. Mrs. Jackson took my hand with an emotional voice. "Carol, we want you to be Sophie's adoptive grandmother. You saved her life, and we want her to have another family, a grandmother like you." I was stunned. Tears welled up again. I don't know what to say," I whispered, hugging Lily and Sophie. "You are the light, the hope for all of us." Sophie looked at me with a shy smile, and in her eyes, I saw a trust I had never seen before. That night, when Lily snuggled up beside me in bed, she asked me in a soft voice, "Grandma, am I a real hero?" I smiled. I kissed her sun-scented hair. "Yes, my love, you are your grandma's bravest hero because you dared to believe in the truth and to speak it out loud." Lily smiled, for the first time in so many days, and I saw the light return to her eyes. She hugged me tightly, whispering, "I love you, Grandma." I held her close with silent tears. "I love you too, Lily." Outside, the night breeze gently moved the bougainvillea, letting petals fall under the bright moon. I closed my eyes, feeling a strange peace. I thought of Michael, of his smile, and I knew that, from heaven, my son was also smiling. He must be proud, because his daughter had saved a life, and because the truth had finally conquered the darkness. I hugged Lily tighter, and in silence, whispered in my heart, "Michael, I did it. I kept my promise to you." And in that moment, I knew that, although there were still trials ahead, the light had returned to our small family. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell this to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence within their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story is like a candle that can light someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am convinced that courage leads us to better days. In the meantime, on the end screen, I'm leaving you two of the channel's most beloved stories. I'm sure they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.